Thank you, Mrs. Hobhouse. It's a great pleasure to be here under your chairmanship this afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to raise the issue of inland flooding and how we help the Minister to help tackle this tsunami of inland flooding that is sweeping so much of this country, not just my beautiful constituency of Mid-Norfolk, but many other areas. And I think the presence of so many colleagues from all parties, all counties, or certainly many counties, speaks volumes about the scale of the problem. And Ms. Hobbs, I want to start in the December of 2020, when I really fully woke up to the scale of what was coming. It was a lovely Christmas in Mid-Norfolk, and as with many colleagues in our part of the world, the phone started ringing. And I spent, along with many people, that week of Christmas bailing out constituents, clearing out sewage, helping to get Anglia Water to come and pump out houses. And it didn't just happen in one village, it happened in about 7 or 8 across Mid-Norfolk. And at that point I realised the scale of what was coming and why in the constituency letterbox this issue had been becoming increasingly prevalent. And following that, I set up the Mid-Norfolk Flood Partnership with the 14 villages that had been worst affected. And as a result of that, we set out 15 very practical things that we in Norfolk could do. And we set up with the County Council the Norfolk Flood Alliance. And then this year we held the first Norfolk Flood Summit. And I wanted to take this opportunity today just to update on some of that work and to flag some of the things that we've identified that we really hope the Minister, and I commend her for the grip that she's shown in gripping this problem in arriving in this office, and I think she's on the cusp of really having a chance to do something quite significant for generations to come. But I wanted to highlight the things that in Mid-Norfolk we are particularly suffering from, say something about what really the problem is in our part of the world, because it's different in different parts of the country, and to set out some suggestions for things that I hope the Minister in the flood review that she's leading will take on board. And to that end, I've arranged a flood summit, an all-party flood summit on June the 2nd with the 4 APBGs. It tells you something, Ms. Hobhouse, when there are 4 APBGs set up, standing room only, in order to deal with flooding. And of the 400 new MPs or whatever have arrived in Parliament, I think 100 of them have put flooding very high on their list. So this is a big issue, I think. It's no longer a marginal issue. And I want to say something about the importance of gripping this at scale so that future generations don't have to experience the horrors that our constituents have, i.e. Put wind in the Minister's sails to do something that Whitehall often struggles with. Often, I know as a veteran minister myself, the sticking tape solution is often the easy one the tempting one to reach for. But this, as I think she knows, requires a structural change in the way we think about water across our economy. So Ms. Hobhouse, Mid-Norfolk, the clue is in the name, it's not a maritime constituency. And I'm talking today about inland flooding. I appreciate there's a coastal flooding problem. One of the issues in Norfolk, actually, is we've had so much coastal flooding that the focus has been on that, not so much on the inland flooding. My constituency is largely made up of Breckland, the glacial clays and sands. Clue, it shouldn't be flooding. It's dry, very dry. And when you can have water and sand, you have very productive agricultural land. And yes, we have some lower-lying, very beautiful areas, the chalk streams, the Wensum Valley, the Yare, the Tudd, which are areas where you shouldn't be building, not least because they're sites of special scientific interest and hugely strong habitats, are very beautiful, but they're also prone to flooding. So why is Mid-Norfolk flooding, is the question I hear you all asking. Because it shouldn't be flooding. Other areas should be, but not Mid-Norfolk. And there are several answers, but let me just first of all list out the scale of what's happened in the last 5 years. 22 of my villages have had serious flooding, by which I mean sewage washing between houses, and more than 5 houses affected at one time. So there are plenty of houses that live near a ditch or a river and get some flooding. I'm talking about, at scale, serious flooding with chronic consequences for the people affected. I'll give you an example. Attleborough Mill Lane is a culvert, terribly designed in the 70s. No one's taken responsibility for it. It's flooded every year for 10 years. The 4 houses at the entrance to the culvert have flooded every year for 10 years. Last autumn, 100 houses in Mill Lane flooded. Well, that's when people really start to wake up and understand. And this is happening. I'll happily give way.
important debate to the House. And as soon as I walked in, a colleague looked at me in astonishment and said, "Is there flooding in West Hampstead?" And I said, actually, there is, and it only takes a heavy rainstorm to have all the homes in my constituency filled with water and sewage. And the reason why I intervened at this point is because we have a middle lane as well in West Hampstead, which has been flooded. It's not quite the same one, but I feel the risk of surface water flooding hasn't been taken seriously. And I find it strange because properties in danger from surface water flooding outnumber those in danger from rivers and seas by 2 to 1. And I'm proud that our friends in City Hall are actually publishing their surface water strategy tomorrow. But I'd like the honourable member to address the fact that developers, I feel, also have a role to play in managing surface water flooding. And I'm sure he's going to address that, but I wanted him to know that there are others in this room who also agree with him about the role of developers.
Well, the honourable lady makes a brilliant point, and at the risk of opening the floodgate of interventions too early, I absolutely will come to that point at pace so that members across the House can pile in. I just want to, because the poor... yes, I'll give way to my great and honourable friend.
Can I commend the honourable gentleman for bringing this forward? He's absolutely right. One of the problems, if I can put forward the reasoning behind what the honourable gentleman is referring to, it's not just in Mid-Norfolk, it's right across this great whole United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It's the old system of building houses. The storm drain and the sewage went into the one system. That's the way they did it 40, 50 years ago. And the houses that we grew up round about, that creates a problem. Every time you get heavy rain, and rain doesn't come lightly anymore, it comes in storms like hurricanes, and it brings a deluge of water. But the system isn't able to cope with that. So does the honourable gentleman and his solutions in moving forward? It's not just about new developments, it's about the old developments and the old houses and the way that it was okay years ago, but it's not okay today.
Friend, I'm tempted to say my great honourable friend, we've spoken in this hall together so many times, he's absolutely right. And of course Mid-Norfolk has my constituency now has 130 villages, 3 towns. I lost at the last boundary review Windham. Why? Because the rest of my patch has had 10,000 new houses built in the last 10 or 15 years. No constituency, I think, I beg, possibly the honourable member of South West, but very few have had as many houses as I have, and that is part of it. But of course what's happening is developers are tending to build on the outskirts of villages and towns. It's the easy place to dump commuter housing and not upgrading the drains. And so little villages that have happily existed and been able to drain themselves for years and cope with some growth are now finding huge problems with the existing drainage infrastructure not being able to cope, which leads to the sewerage. Yes, I'll happily give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way and congratulate him on securing this debate. On the point of new development, I wonder whether or not he agrees with the Liberal Democrats that making the water companies statutory consultees in the planning process would mean that developers can't build where the infrastructure isn't able to account for the new houses.
Yes, it's a very good point. I do agree. I'm going to go a lot further than that if members will allow me to get to the radical central elements of my bill. But yes, I do agree that that is absolutely something we need to do. So across Mid-Norfolk, the 23 villages, I'm not going to list them all, but it goes from Old Buckenham in the deep south-east through Wretham, Hockham, Rocklands, Thompson, Watton, Tony, Cranbrook, a cluster of villages that are co-adjacent. North Elmham, Billingford, Ling, Elsing, Yaxham, Mattershall, right up to Weasenham, which should not be flooding up in my northwest frontier. And what that tells you is this is not actually just geomorphological. This is as a result of housing and a result of lack of investment in the drainage infrastructure. And the truth is, the very patient people in Mid-Norfolk, they're pretty patient, they've had me as their MP for 14 years, are getting really impatient about this because the contract of the state, the contract of the citizen, you pay your taxes, you buy a house, you don't these days expect that much, but you do expect that your house won't flood because of systemic and structural failures of national infrastructure. And when it does and you ring, you hope somebody's going to come and pump it out, and you expect the water companies, you're paying very high bills, to be there and to help. And the service hasn't been there. It just hasn't been, the responsiveness hasn't been there until you're able to sit on the answering machine and ring enough times that eventually a tanker arrives. And so people are fed up, and they're fed up with that, and they're fed up with the fact that this has been coming for quite a long time, and they're very excited by the fact that the Minister is gripping it. So let me just spin through what the problems, it seems to me, are as I've experienced it in Norfolk. Of course, it's climate change, and let's not undermine the importance of that. We had last year the 8 wettest months on record, one after another, and that isn't happening for any sort of weird strange, unexplained reason. It's climate change. It is happening. But it's also that, in my part of the world, we're building a lot of houses, and the country's got to build them. So I don't think not building houses is the answer. It's also, and the devil is, of course, in the detail, it's that our agricultural practices have changed. In my part of the world, a proud farming county, we now have a lot of contract farming. Big land owners, often pension funds or remote. The farming isn't done by the local landowner, it's done by contract farmers on a very tight, low-margin contract, huge bits of kit, roaring around trying to get the job done and scratch a living. So the old days, I grew up on a farm where in a rainy day, a rainy month, you go mend the fences and clear the ditches. That work doesn't tend to be in the contract farming contracts today. So there's a basic maintenance problem. Our county councils have seen their budgets hammered by the rising cost of social care and some of the austerity 1.0. So there's a problem with maintenance. Then we've got a big planning problem. And the reason I think the point just made by the honourable gentleman is a good one. But the real problem in my patch has been that because of the 5-year land supply, good planners have sat down and said, well, we don't want to build here and we shouldn't build there, and statutory consultations. And then many of the big developers have land banked, so they've taken their permissions down where they know they're going to get them, haven't built them out, and then invoked the 5-year land supply, which is a very sensible coalition policy designed to make sure that you couldn't have a 20-year plan and then ignore it. They've used that 5-year land supply to blow the whistle and say, well, you're not building out at your 5-year land supply, so we'll now invoke the freedom to dump where we want. It's a win-win. So they then dump 100 houses outside Yaxham, 200 outside Matchell. Of course they want to go near Norwich and dump on the outskirts of a village near a road and move on and not invest. And that is what has driven a lot of the problem. So statutory consultation is fine, but this is also a planning issue. And part of what my bill addresses is I think we have got to somehow make sure that developers, when they're building like that, it's not just that they're statutory consulted and they go through the tick boxes. I think the only way to make the developers really take this seriously is to say, look, if you build and within 5-10 years of your building there is significant flooding that didn't used to happen in that area before, you're going to be on the hook for upgrading the drains. You're going to be on the hook for doing the repair work. To create a fiduciary financial liability that the directors of those companies will say, well, I think we'd better upgrade, we better do the investment up front, rather than rely on consultations. Because I think in the end, unless somebody is going to pay for this, and to be fair, the water companies have got to pay more, but we're also asking them to pay billions to improve pipes, billions to build reservoirs, billions to stop leaks. So somewhere in this system, we have to find a bit more money to do the upgrade of the traditional drains and improving the infrastructure. And I think it behoves us all to give the Minister some solutions. Where's the money going to come from? Nobody in Mid-Norfolk wants to pay more tax. They don't want to pay more council tax. It's already very high going on social care. So where's the money going to come from? And so I think one answer is from the developers. But there's also another problem. In Mid-Norfolk, when you pick up the phone, who's in charge, you ask? Well, there are 36 organisations in Norfolk with responsibility for flooding prevention. I know in Whitehall that probably seems a low number, but in Norfolk people kind of want one. And we do have one. It's called the Local Flood Authority, the LFA. It's great, but they have no money and no power. The good news is, in addition to them, we have the IDBs, the Internal Drainage Boards, who've been looking after flooding since about 1550. They really know their ditches, their dikes, and colleagues I can see nodding with agricultural constituencies know that these are the very local experts who know about hydrology and water, and they know how it works. And the problem is they've had their budgets either cut or not maintained at the pace at which the demand that's hitting them. And of course, there are quite small number of areas, I think it's 15 to 20 districts, particularly in the east of England, the Fens, Cambridgeshire and Norfolk. There are other areas that have a very high incident of flooding. And the areas where they're being hit, the IDBs are having to be propped up by the district councils, which means the residents of those areas are then being penalised by funding being quite properly diverted into funding, but into flooding, but that's funding that they're not getting into their public services. So there's a huge problem with the allocation of funding. Meanwhile, I notice the Environment Agency, I'll give way happily to my neighbour.
I'm very pleased my council colleague gave way. Thank you very much. I just wanted to touch upon internal drainage boards, and I'm very pleased that you mentioned that. Kings Lynn and West Norfolk Borough Council in my constituency, for every £1 they collect in council tax, 43p now goes to internal drainage board levies. It's completely unsustainable. So I wonder if the bill that the honourable member talks about addresses IDB levies and calls for a permanent, full-time solution to this funding issue.
Well, I'm grateful to my neighbour and good friend, the Honourable Member for South West Norfolk. Yes, it absolutely does, and I will take his steer to get to the point of the guts of my bill. He's absolutely right, and in our part of the world, the IDBs are crucial. And when I looked into all this, Minister, thinking, how come Norfolk is top of the league table of flooding? Well, I discovered, even more shockingly, is we're not. I think we're counting number 6 or 7 out of 10, which is why there are so many colleagues from other counties. So, I want to suggest that the problem really is fourfold, and that is what my bill in draft, and I'm keen to use today as an opportunity to polish those provisions. We have 4 provisions in the bill. Provision 1 is around responsibilities. And it seems to me that we need to have a much clearer, sharper set of responsibilities at the top. The Environment Agency obviously have overall responsibility for flooding in the country, but this is a local problem, and locally we've got to properly empower the local the strategic flood authorities, and we have to re-empower the IDBs. And at the moment, many of them are finding that in order to deal with flooding, they're coming up against all sorts of environmental green tape produced by the very agencies that are there to stop flooding. So many of our drains and ditches have now, it looks as though the Environment Agency are more interested in filling them with mud and wildflowers than actually encouraging them to be the places that drain the water. So people are getting frustrated with a sort of well-intended green bureaucracy that is getting in the way of local solutions. So responsibilities put back locally. Secondly, funding. And I strongly believe that we should be top-slicing and ring-fencing some of the funding for the Environment Agency to give it to the IDBs and to the strategic flood authorities. It would be a rounding error on the Environment Agencies. Yes, Ms. Hobhouse.
Sorry to come to an end because it's a very short debate for many members want to come in.
Do we have 90 minutes?
We have an hour. 60 minutes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought we had 90. I'm so sorry. Yes, so secondly, funding, and we've got to put the funding in the hands of the people who have the responsibility. Thirdly, planning liabilities, and I want to create liabilities on development companies so that they have an incentive, proper incentive, not just a vague instruction, incentive to upgrade the drainage facilities. I will happily give way.
Because actually earlier today I actually met with Thames Water and the SES Water representatives to discuss this actual very issue, and they all actually agreed that as professional consultees, their contributions are absolutely not given the same weight as statutory consultees. And I know my honourable friends already mentioned this, but they definitely will give some thought to actually being consultees as a minimum just for medium to large developments. Does my honourable member agree with this?
Yes, I think she makes a really important point, and I think this is all part of the planning mix. We have got to get this right. And my last point is on data, Ms. Hobhouse. It is very striking that when you have an area that floods like this, you reach for data. How bad is it? How much worse is it than it used to be? There isn't a properly collected data set. I have a map of all the dots of flooding in my patch and in Norfolk, but it seems to me now it wouldn't be that difficult to have a properly connected national flood heat map at the Cabinet Office so we can see where this is coming. And if it's coming this much more quickly in mid-Norfolk, and I suspect many other areas, the Cabinet Office need to be aware this is a national critical infrastructure resilience issue that's growing. And locally, we need flood maps so we can see where it's likely to flood this winter and to prepare. And although I know, as the former Minister for the Met Office, they have amazing data, and they can now predict that in certain areas of geomorphology, when it rains at this extent over in the west, the surge will hit. We can now predict with AI and these tools, but it's not properly being done. And I think there's a lot more we could do, Ms. Hobhouse, on data. I'm conscious, forgive me, I thought it was a 90-minute debate, so I'm conscious of time and how many colleagues. I will close at that point, Ms. Hobhouse, and look forward to the comments of my colleagues from all parties.
A minute.
Thank you, Mrs. Hobhouse, for guiding us this afternoon. Can I thank the Minister, the opposition spokesman, and the 16, I think it was, colleagues from across the House who've spoken, and the rule of tens in this place normally applies. Those who come in, and many others who would have wanted to, and I think that shows the Minister how much interest there is. I just make 3 brief points. I think this is a serious national problem that can only be solved locally. And the local solution is the key. It's getting worse fast. In Norfolk, in the last 18 months, 1,000 houses have been flooded, and 200 have had internal floodwater. This didn't used to happen 5-6 years ago. It's getting bad. And it's costing the county and the country a fortune. This quarter, Q1, 200 million of approved claims, which was up 67 million on the previous quarter. This is getting fast. This is getting a lot worse very fast. So can I urge the Minister, on behalf of all those people who are really nervous out there worrying, I've had one constituent who's taken their own life, they've been so worried about this, to be really bold, really brave, and make sure she strikes a blow for the local communities and the local experts and give them the power and the funding to do what they know how to do best.